The Pigeon, The Pigeon by Patrick Süskind is a 1987 novella. Write a kind of almost like short story to, I think I've heard it referred to as both of those things, but it is, at any rate, an 80-page, 70 something, maybe 80-page, long, Kafka-esque, it's been referred to, and it is, great, like I do relate Süskind to my other, this is my second Süskind novel, or work, and it is, obviously after the, his probably most famous one, the center kind of piece of his whole career, because he actually started his career doing dramas and different kind of plays throughout Germany, especially where he grew up, where he was from, and he, but yeah, he produced, I think it was called the, darn, I'm blanking on the name, but it was the Double Bass, I think it was called, and it was like for stage, it actually that kind of gave him enough kind of almost international, I think, freedom, or sorry, no, international appraisal to be able to kind of transfer more into the literary world. But he was obviously, obviously doing a lot of different kind of literary kind of humanistic kind of projects before that too. But I notice Süskind has a very emphatic kind of love, maybe a love-hate relationship with Paris. I'm sorry, not Paris, but just France in general, but particularly Paris. That's where Perfume is set, and this is where this, I believe, is set. This follows a man named Jonathan Noel, who is, we get a very intimate kind of third person, but it is basically following deep into almost as if it's first person in that sense. So the first sentence, just to give an idea, or the paragraph, At the time, the Pigeon affair overtook him, unhinging his life from one day to the next. Jonathan Noel, already past 50, could look back over a good 20-year period of uneventfulness and would never have expected anything of importance could ever overtake him again, other than death someday. And that was perfectly all right with him. He was never fond of events and hated outright those that rattled his inner equilibrium and made a muddle of the external arrangements of his life. So that kind of gives that first picture, gives a very, I think, pretty in-depth, adequate peek into this guy's life. He is a very diligent guy. He's very detailed. He's very, he might even to the point of almost mania at times. He goes almost stark insane over the simplest things, that if everything has to be in its right place, otherwise he's going to have a fit. He actually refers to, he's so solitary that he actually refers to his room as his little apartment thing on the 5th floor or something, high up there away from the world, as his little mistress, I think. Because he has such a love for it, and he's constantly, with him. And but yeah, so he's, but we have a good reason. He goes into the background. He doesn't just kind of parochial, or focus linearly, zeroing in just on this one isolated event. He talks about kind of his back history on how Noel has, what kind of brought him in this situation. Like, why does he have the certain things that he has, or why is he the way that he is? And one such reason was that he was born during the Second World War to parents that were immediately taken hostage, I think, and killed. I think they were taken missing because they were put in camps, I think, and they ended up never coming back. So they were kind of presumed to be dead. So you have an orphan, just like Gwenway from Perfume, right? I think Süskind also has kind of a soft spot for orphans too. So not only that, but he did have a wife for some time, but sometime down the line they kind of broke, separate ways. But not only that, but she also ended up marrying this Tunisian guy and just running off with him and just kind of like, kicking him to the curb. So he's like, okay, so now I'm just going to kind of live on the only thing I'm really care about is just not being seen. I don't want to be seen by anybody. So he kind of cloisters himself up. He bubbles. He kind of almost like saran wrap bubbles himself in a way in this place, and he's like, I'm not going to see another soul. And the only other person that ever he sees on a kind of a daily basis, if that, is Madame Rocard, and she is the concierge, and she is kind of a firm, kind of working class lady that he kind of has almost a tacit disgust for, and the way he sees her, and he's constantly kind of never says a word to her except until the pigeon incident. And so basically what the pigeon is that he notices that right when he comes out of his out of his door and into the world, and in the morning time he is greeted by a pigeon that's sitting perched on one of the I guess kind of the stanchion, not stanchions, but colonnade or whatever, of the door of the kind of steps leading down. So he's he has to kind of immediately he's like coward. He makes like a kind of it's like the way he describes it is like a very funny kind of Wild West showdown. He really he really is like the way he sees describes it is just really funny. I don't know if I can find it off the cuff here, but the way he goes on for a good amount of pages, where he's like talking about how he the pigeon laid its head on to one side and was glaring at Jonathan with its left eye, the small circular disc, brown with its black center and dreadful to behold. It was like a button sewn to the feathers of the head, lashless, brown, browless, quite naked, turned quite shamelessly to the world and monstrously open. At the same time, however, there was something guarded and devious in that eye, like it would seem to be neither open nor guarded. So that's kind of another thing, is like this panopticon kind of phenomenon of the want to not be seen. And the pigeon probably the reason why that this is kind of maybe me opining a little bit and conjectural, but I get the inkling that the reason that he's so is because pigeons have no shame. I think it's because pigeons, where other people kind of are, reciprocate that kind of, okay, well, if you're gonna not ignore me, or if you're gonna ignore me, I'll ignore you. I get that kind of tacitly, but there's also but with the animal kingdom, and with birds in particular, there's kind of a, with this almost a reptilian, well, they are reptilian, of the kingdom, but yeah, they are, zoology is very, surface level, but they are of the reptilia kind of overarching kingdom, and they are, if you look at chickens or roosters or whatever, guinea hens, like they all have these very still kind of, these very like kind of stridently just stolid and inert kind of eyes that just like it's like they just like very machine-like. I think Descartes called them automata. I think he talked about ducks being like automata, something like that. So you get this idea. So he's like kind of has to face off this pigeon, and then he ends up going back to his room, and he's like, the next, no joke, the next thing that Noel plans is to leave, because he's like, I'm getting out of town, I'm not facing that pigeon. So he grabs all his stuff, and then he goes back out, and the pigeon, like, he kind of rushes past, and he's like, I'm not, so he literally packs, he goes to the long hole, like, he's ready to upend everything that he has, all this money he's paid for this flat that, I think he's about to purchase, actually. That's why he's trying to kind of be on good terms, but he's like, even that, he's not. But anyway, yeah, he's willing to give all that up just to get away from that pigeon. So he goes out, and then in the morning, and he goes to work, and he works as his outside of a bank. He is something of a kind of security guard, but his main duty is to salute the president of the bank every time he comes in. So every time he rolls in with his fancy car, he's supposed to like salute this guy. And the one job he had to do, he misses, and he feels like awful about it. Like, I guess this, maybe in his mind and in the way he perceives things, maybe that is a pretty big deal. These kind of very superficial kind of things that we would think are kind of silly or nonsensical, to him are, he takes to such heart that he can't, like, he's like, I can't you know, I not only do I have this pigeon idea, you know, this pigeon thing, but I've also, you know, the president of the bank, I didn't even do that one simple thing. I missed that because he was so preoccupied. And another thing that shows up is he has this homeless guy that's sitting across the street, is like the image of like complete tranquility and calm, because even though he's unkempt and he's you know, as homeless people are, you know, usually are, not to stereotype necessarily, but yeah, as you know, even though this, you know, this guy across the street, there's a particular name for like a vagrant that French people use. I think I can't remember what it is, but he basically envies him because this person has everything that he doesn't have. Like even though there's no security of like a home or anonymity, or maybe he does have, but you know, there's no financial security. There's no guarantee of a paycheck at all by anybody. There's no guarantee that anybody's even going to tip you, or not, you know, but you know, any that to give you any money out of the goodness of their hearts. But yeah, you're offering off of kind of the kindness of strangers. So basically, there's a lot of like dread that he feels. Like he's like now having kind of a very getting manic because he's like he wishes he was like that, and he's ready to kind of, you know, give all that everything up that he has. And so basically, Jonathan Noel comes. He's basically comes home and he's like kind of has the last thing that does it, the straw that breaks the camel's back, is he ends up ripping a part of his pants. And this is like a very big deal to him because it's like the outer kind of, you know, the artifice of, you know, presented to the world is very, very, like, if that's, you know, that's set off, that compromises everything. So he's like goes to a seamstress, and then she says that she's working and she's booked and she can't like take care of his stuff, and he's like very forthright and says like, you know, I need you to do this now. And she's like, I can take care of it next week. And then all these things come to a head in a very, all these everything comes up to a surgeon, what's the word, very potent kind of hysteria for the main character. He's like at home like weeping, going in like and then finally basically when he goes home and he's like has this fit, and he's like thinking about, you know, all these different things, the way his life could go, and he's like, he ends up having, you know, he ends up waking the next morning, and there's a symbol of the puddles that he sees going throughout Paris, and he's seeing these puddles as you know, as kind of an enemy, kind of unwanted kind of, you know, problem. Like he doesn't want to you know, soil himself, but you know, when he was a kid he didn't think about any of that, so he was like totally up to jump in anything, you know, any puddle, as kids like to do. And so Jonathan is basically at the end of the story is actually happy. You know, he comes back and it's actually as a very kind of, I thought, unsuspecting happy ending, because he's not in a cheap kind of rom-com like everybody, you know, like everybody kind of reconciles their differences and they kind of, you know, everybody kind of embraces sappily, and you know, or like, you know, family sitcoms in the 1970s or 80s, but these traditional values. But yeah, it has a way of, he's able to kind of continue on with the absurdity of these things. And the pigeon he doesn't care about. The pigeon, he actually goes to Madame Ricard, and she takes care of it. She actually has somebody else kind of clean it up, and you know, this is a very great gesture for him, you know, because he's able to now live in peace. But he's also, at the same time, he was also prepared to kind of face the pigeon as well. So it's like kind of a so yeah, it ends with him walking throughout the streets and in a new state of mind of like alacrity and present. Like he's like, now he can actually smell the flowers. Like, but yeah, that is all I have for The Pigeon by Patrick Süskind. And yeah, thanks for watching.